I knew something was off the moment the knock came. Not the polite, hesitant knock of a delivery driver or the casual tap of a neighbor, but the sharp, authoritative pounding that assumes guilt before a word is spoken. 3 heavy hits. A pause. Then 3 more, louder. The kind meant to be heard by the whole street. I glanced at the clock. 7:18 a.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the front window, I saw 2 men standing on my porch. Dark jackets. Cheap-looking badges clipped crookedly to their chests. One of them had his hand resting a little too confidently on a baton that looked more theatrical than functional. The other was holding a clipboard, already scanning my house like he was taking mental notes for a report he hadn't earned the right to write. Fake authority has a look to it. Real authority doesn't need to perform. I opened the door calmly. "Sir," the taller one said immediately, chest puffed out, "we're HOA enforcement officers. We've received multiple complaints regarding violations on this property. You need to come with us. Not speak with us. Not clarify. Come with us." I raised an eyebrow. "Come with you where?" He hesitated just for a fraction of a second. That pause told me everything. "For questioning," he said finally. "Failure to comply may result in arrest." Arrest. By an HOA. I almost laughed, but I stopped myself. People like this thrive on reaction. They want anger, fear, confusion, anything they can use to justify escalating. So I did the opposite. I stepped aside slightly, folded my arms, and let silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. "That's interesting," I said calmly. "Under what authority?" The clipboard guy jumped in. "The Homeowners Association grants us enforcement powers. You've ignored fines, failed to respond to notices, and refused inspection access." Every word was wrong. I don't belong to the HOA. My property is adjacent, not governed. Different deed. Different jurisdiction. Different everything. And even if I were part of it, none of what they were saying gave them the right to detain anyone, especially not on private property, especially not without real law enforcement present. Still, they stood there like they owned the situation. The taller one stepped closer. Too close. Invading personal space like intimidation was part of the training manual they downloaded off the internet. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one last time to cooperate." I looked past him and noticed a few curtains twitching across the street. Neighbors were watching. Phones were probably out. HOA drama traveled fast around here. Good. Because that meant witnesses. "I'm happy to cooperate," I said evenly. "But I'd like to see your credentials." He flashed the badge quickly, too quickly. Cheap metal. No department seal. No identification number. No name I could verify. Clipboard guy didn't even bother trying. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just entitlement, it was impersonation. And that's not a civil issue. That's a federal problem. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I reached slowly into my pocket, not abruptly, not aggressively, and pulled out my wallet. I opened it calmly, flipped past a few cards, and stopped on the one that mattered. I held it up. The color drained from both their faces. Because staring back at them wasn't a driver's license. It was my FBI credentials. The taller one swallowed hard. Clipboard guy took an involuntary step back. The power dynamic flipped so fast you could almost hear it snap. "I think," I said quietly, "you should leave my property. Right now." And that was just the beginning. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. The 2 fake HOA officers stood frozen on my porch, suddenly very aware that the roles they'd assigned themselves had just evaporated. The taller one recovered first, or tried to. He cleared his throat, straightened his jacket, and attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There must be some misunderstanding," he said quickly. "We're just here on behalf of the association to—" "No," I cut in, still calm. "You're here impersonating authority you don't have. And you just threatened an unlawful arrest." That word, unlawful, hit differently. Clipboard guy's hands started shaking. He adjusted his grip like that would steady more than just his fingers. I could almost hear the internal calculation happening in real time. How bad is this? How fast can we get out of it? The taller one took a half step back. Sir, we didn't mean any harm. We were told. Who told you? I asked. Another pause. Another mistake. He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced toward the street, where more curtains were twitching now. One neighbor had stepped fully onto their porch. Another had a phone very obviously pointed in our direction. Fake authority hates witnesses. Real authority documents them. I shifted slightly, so the door camera had a clean view of all three of us. They noticed. Of course they did. Let me be clear, I said evenly. You have no legal authority to detain anyone. You have no jurisdiction on this property. And threatening arrest while wearing fake badges crosses from HOA nonsense into criminal impersonation. Clipboard guy swallowed. We didn't threaten. You did, I replied. Twice. It's on camera. That's when the panic finally surfaced. The taller one raised his hands slightly, palms out, the universal gesture of let's de-escalate this before it gets worse. Look, sir, we're just volunteers. The HOA president asked us to come talk to you because you wouldn't respond to fines. Which fines? I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it. You see the problem? I continued. You're enforcing penalties that don't exist, from an organization that doesn't govern this property, using threats you're not legally allowed to make. Clipboard guy finally spoke, his voice cracking. We can just leave. That would be wise, I said. They didn't move. Not yet. Because now they were stuck between two fears, staying and making it worse, or leaving and admitting they were never in control. Entitled people hate that moment, the one where compliance disappears and accountability shows up instead. The taller one tried one last angle. There's no need to escalate this. We can resolve it internally. Too late for that, I replied. You escalated at the moment you impersonated law enforcement. That did it. They backed off the porch almost in sync, like poorly rehearsed actors finally realizing the audience wasn't buying the performance. Clipboard guy dropped a folded notice on the ground by accident, or maybe on purpose, hoping it would look official later. I watched it flutter there as they retreated toward the sidewalk. Before they left the property line, I added one final sentence. If either of you returns, or if anyone else from the HOA does something like this again, I will involve actual law enforcement. And it won't be a conversation. They nodded. Too fast. Too eager. Then they turned and walked away, badges gleaming uselessly in the morning light. Across the street, a neighbor clapped. Quietly. Another shook their head in disbelief. Someone laughed. I closed the door, locked it, and saved the footage. Because I knew this wasn't over. People who fake power rarely stop on their own. They double down. They spin stories. They try to regain control. And the HOA president? They were about to make a very bad decision trying to protect the wrong people. I hadn't even finished my coffee when my phone started vibrating nonstop. At first, I ignored it. That's rule one when entitled people realize their bluff failed, they scramble. Calls, texts, emails, urgent notices. Silence makes them unravel faster. By the fifth buzz, I glanced at the screen. HOA president calling. I let it ring. Then came the voicemail. Her tone was completely different from the woman who'd sent threatening letters for months. Gone was the smug confidence. In its place, forced politeness stretched so thin you could hear the cracks. Hi, this is Linda, president of the HOA. There's been a miscommunication this morning, and I think we should clear it up right away. Please call me back as soon as possible. Miscommunication. Of course. 10 seconds later, an email arrived. Subject line. Urgent HOA matter. No fines mentioned. No violations. Just a request for a friendly meeting. That's when I knew she'd already spoken to her fake officers. And they told her exactly how badly they messed up. An hour later, she escalated. A real police cruiser rolled slowly down my street and stopped in front of my house. Not lights. Not sirens. Just a calm, deliberate stop. Now that got my attention. I stepped outside before anyone could knock. The officer was already out of the car, relaxed posture, hands visible. This wasn't a raid. This was a fact check.
Morning, he said.
We got a call about a disturbance involving impersonation of law enforcement. Yeah, I replied. That would be the HOA. His eyebrow twitched just slightly. Mind if I ask what happened? I walked him through everything. The fake badges, the threats, the cameras, the footage saved with timestamps. He listened carefully, nodding, taking notes. When I finished, he let out a slow breath. You're not the first complaint we've had about that association, he said. But this is the first time they've tried something like this. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. They broke the law, didn't they? Yes, he said plainly. Impersonating officers is a criminal offense, even if they claim it was symbolic. Symbolic? That word again. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I told him not yet. Not because I felt bad, because I wanted them to keep talking. The officer nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. We'll have a conversation with the HOA president, he said. And I strongly suggest you keep all your footage. I already do, I replied. After he left, the neighborhood buzzed. People came over. Questions flew. Stories surfaced. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. One neighbor had been fined for a mailbox the HOA didn't even install. Another was threatened over parking on their own driveway. Everyone had assumed compliance was easier than fighting.
Until now.
By late afternoon, Linda called again. This time, she wasn't polite. She was angry. You embarrassed the association, she snapped the moment I answered. You had no right to involve the police. I smiled. You sent fake police to my house, I said calmly. What did you think was going to happen? She started yelling about authority, respect, rules, consequences. I let her finish. Then I said one sentence that ended the call. Linda, I don't live in your HOA. And I never have. Silence. The kind that lands like a punch. She hung up without another word. And that's when I knew what her next move would be. Because entitled people don't apologize when they're cornered. They retaliate. And she was about to try something that would destroy her entire HOA in one shot. The retaliation came faster than I expected. The very next morning, bright orange notices appeared on my gate, my mailbox, and even taped to my front door, like warning labels. Final violation. Immediate compliance required. They looked official enough to scare anyone who didn't know better. Big fonts. Fake ordinance numbers. Threats of liens and seizures. I peeled one off and laughed. They'd crossed from pretending to be police into pretending to be a government. That's when I stopped playing defense. I made one phone call, then another. By noon, I had copies of property plats, historical deeds, and zoning overlays spread across my kitchen table. The HOA boundaries stopped 2 streets short of my land. Always had. The developer had tried to absorb my parcel years ago and failed. That rejection was recorded, signed, and stamped. Linda knew this. She just assumed no one would ever check. At 2:17 p.m., an email blast went out to the entire neighborhood from the HOA board. I got a copy too. Subject line: Enforcement Action Notice. They claimed I was illegally occupying HOA-controlled land, refusing lawful authority, and threatening community harmony. They announced an emergency board vote to authorize towing, fines, and legal action. That email was my invitation. I replied to everyone. Not just the board. Everyone. I attached the plats, the deeds, the county letters, screenshots of the fake officers, still frames of their badges, time-stamped footage of them threatening arrest. I didn't add insults, just facts. The silence afterward was deafening. Then the replies started. Residents asking questions. Board members backpedaling. One treasurer claiming she wasn't informed. Another resigning effective immediately. Someone forwarded an older email from Linda explicitly acknowledging my property was outside HOA control. That one did real damage. By evening, the HOA website went offline. At 7 p.m., 2 actual detectives knocked on my door. Different department. Different tone. They weren't there to intimidate me. They were there because impersonation, harassment, and fraudulent enforcement crossed into felony territory once paperwork and threats escalated. I handed them everything. Organized. Labeled.
Easy.
One detective shook his head as he flipped through it. She kept digging, he muttered. Didn't she? I asked what happens next. Next, he said, is subpoenas. The neighborhood didn't sleep that night. By morning, word had spread beyond our street. Social media posts popped up. Screenshots leaked. A local community group picked it up, framing it as an HOA over each story. Comments poured in from people sharing similar experiences, recognizing the same tactics, the same intimidation playbook used everywhere. Linda tried damage control. She sent a final email claiming the notices were templates accidentally distributed and blamed a third-party security contractor for the fake officers. Too late. Contractors don't send emails signed with your name. By noon, 3 more board members resigned. The bank froze the HOA account pending investigation. And a lawyer representing the association left me a voicemail asking for a mutually beneficial resolution.
I didn't call back.
Because this was never about money. It was about precedent. For years, people like Linda survived by assuming homeowners wouldn't push back, wouldn't document, wouldn't understand the system well enough to fight it. She forgot one thing. I make a living understanding systems. And once you map an entitled person's power structure, dismantling it is just a matter of time. By then, the fear had shifted directions. Doors stayed closed. Meetings were canceled. Authority dissolved the moment scrutiny arrived. Section 5 wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be dramatic. It would be final, irreversible, and impossible for anyone involved to deny again at last. The end didn't arrive with sirens or shouting. It arrived quietly, the way real consequences always do. 3 days after the detectives visited, a certified letter showed up in my mailbox. Not from the HOA.
From the county.
It formally acknowledged an ongoing investigation into impersonation of law enforcement, fraudulent enforcement actions, and misuse of collected HOA funds. The letter also made one thing very clear. Until the investigation concluded, the HOA had no authority to issue notices, collect fees, or take enforcement action of any kind. The neighborhood woke up HOA-free. That afternoon, Linda's car was gone. No goodbye email. No explanation. Just an empty driveway and a for sale sign that appeared less than a week later. People who had once avoided eye contact suddenly waved. A few neighbors stopped by with awkward apologies, admitting they'd been afraid to speak up before. Fear evaporates fast when the bully loses power. The board officially dissolved itself 2 weeks later. The remaining members cited legal uncertainty and administrative strain, but everyone knew the truth. Once their authority was questioned, none of them wanted their names tied to what came next. And what came next was accountability. Subpoenas were issued. Bank records examined. Emails recovered. The fake security company turned out to be a shell entity created by someone connected directly to Linda. The uniforms? Ordered online. The badges? Cheap replicas. The paperwork? Copied from legitimate municipal templates and altered. Every layer peeled back revealed another bad decision made by someone who thought no one would ever challenge them. I was asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. Not out of anger. Out of responsibility. Because if I didn't, she'd do it again somewhere else. Different street. Different people. Same playbook. Months later, the case wrapped quietly. No headline-making trial. No viral footage. Just fines, probation, permanent records, and civil judgments that followed her wherever she went. The kind of ending entitled people never expect because it doesn't come with drama, only permanence. The neighborhood changed after that. People started reading documents, asking questions, attending meetings. Authority stopped being assumed and started being verified. It wasn't hostile. It was healthy. As for me, life went back to normal. Peaceful mornings. Quiet evenings. No orange notices. No strangers pretending to have power they didn't earn. Every once in a while, someone new moves in and asks about the old HOA. I keep it simple. There used to be one, I say. It didn't work out. Because the truth is bigger than one person. Entitlement only survives in silence. It feeds on intimidation, confusion, and people assuming someone else knows better. The moment you document, question, and stand your ground, it collapses under its own weight. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to threaten. You just need facts, patience, and the willingness to let the system work the way it's supposed to, slowly, thoroughly, and without mercy for those who abuse it. Linda thought authority was something you could costume your way into. She learned the hard way that real authority doesn't need a badge. It just needs the truth. And once the truth shows up, there's nowhere left to hide.